The movie begins with a family of 3 having a happy family time together. The man of the family goes by the name Edward, while his wife is called Connie. Edward is escorted by his wife on his way to work while dropping his son Charlie to school. Connie is seen taking a train to go to the city so she would go shopping. The day seemed windy, which uncomfortably blew the dress Connie had worn as she navigated around the streets in search of a taxi. With her vision unclear, she bumped into a young guy called Paul who was carrying a heap of books. They both fell while their belongings were scattered all over. Paul helped Connie pick up her scattered shopping along the pavements. Connie was appreciative by also helping the guy pick his books. She requested Paul to help her stop a taxi for her so she can go take her train back home. Paul noticed that Connie had injured her knee and offered to help her clean her bruised knee since Paul's room apartment was just near. She agreed and followed Paul towards his studio room which contained shelves of books. It was evident that the guy was a writer. Eventually, Connie went to the washroom and cleaned her bruised knee. Afterward, Connie was on her way to exit when Paul asked Connie to pick one book as a souvenir. She is later seen rushing to the train station to go back home. In a later scene, the whole family reunited and Connie narrated her experience with the tornado in the city. On the following day, Connie was at her home where she curiously opened the book offered to her by Paul. A sticky note fell from the book which contained Paul's telephone number. So the following day, Connie went to the phone booth to make a call to Paul to thank him for his generosity. Paul asked Connie to go pay him a visit which she agreed. On arrival she found Paul waiting for her eagerly. Connie was so fascinated with the books in Paul's studio place. Paul offered a cup of coffee which Connie gladly appreciated. In a later scene, Paul told Connie to close her eyes as he directed her hand toward reading a book written in brailles. Connie felt the tension from that act and requested to leave. Paul was so frustrated since she did not stay for long and she did not even drink the tea he had prepared for her. While Connie and Edward were at home, Edward noticed Connie was so upset-minded. She was in deep thoughts and Edward was not able to figure it out. The following day, Connie went to Paul's apartment by herself. She had brought some muffins for Paul. With the background music playing, they both started dancing. Later, Connie came back to her senses that she is at the wrong place and pleaded to leave, but she accidentally forgot her coat. As she came back to pick it up, she was lifted by Paul towards his bedroom. In the next scene, we see Connie on a train. She seemed to be getting into some fantastic memories of what had transpired earlier on while she was at Paul's place. She recalls how dominating Paul was as he had taken her to his bed. While she was at home, she seemed to be having a lot of memories of her together with Paul. Fast forward, she has been visiting and hanging out with Paul for a while without the knowledge of her husband Edward. One day, Paul took Connie on a date, and of which she felt uncomfortable since she did not want to be seen out in public. In some suspicion, Edward started to suspect Connie but without logical evidence, he could not question her. One day while Connie was on her way to meet Paul, she bumped into her friends who seemed to draw her into going to a coffee shop. She agreed since she did not want the 2 nosy friends to know where she was going. While in the coffee shop, Paul entered but did not utter a word to Connie. They are later seen to have gone to the washroom at the same time. They both had a quickie in the washroom. This was risky but they both believed such risks made it memorable for them. On her way back to the table where her friends were, her friends pointed her to a hot guy on the counter who seemed to have caught the lady's eyes. Connie brushed the idea since she did not want them to suspect anything going between her and the hot guy on the bar counter. With suspicion beyond recognition, Edward hired a spy to follow Connie to quench his doubts. Edward told Connie that she is going on a business trip and he will be away from home for a while. Connie took the opportunity to constantly meet up with Paul. All this time, the hired spy was taking pictures of them and he later presented the evidence to Edward. It was so painful for Edward to finally confirm that his wife was having an affair with another guy. In a later scene, while Connie was driving around the city, she spotted Paul holding hands with another lady. She was so furious and jealous that she followed them to show her frustration. Just like before, they went back to Paul's apartment where they did it despite the anger that Connie had towards Paul. Outside the apartment, stood Edward gazing at Paul's window wondering if his wife is still inside getting her guts rearranged. Edward entered the apartment but unluckily he had missed the presence of his cheating wife by just minutes since she had escaped. Edward introduced himself to Paul where he confronted that his wife has been cheating on him with Paul. Paul welcomed Edward to enter the apartment where Paul offered him a drink as they have a chat. At first, it seemed like a confrontation for Edward to know the reason why his wife has been cheating on him, but as Edward went to Paul's bedroom, he was astonished to find unmade bedding indicating that they had just had sex a while ago. Beside the bed, there was a global ornament that Edward recognized to belong to him. Paul said that he was gifted the ornament by Connie without the realization that it belonged to her husband. Edward started crying out of the pain of betrayal. In just a second, he hit Paul on the head using the ornament where Paul fell as blood oozed out of his head. At first, he seemed to be alive, but upon confirmation, Edward realized he had committed first-degree manslaughter. In a hurry, he cleaned up the room to leave no evidence. He wrapped up Paul's lifeless body and took it outside into the back of his car so he would dispose of the body. Later in the movie, we see a team of investigators go to Edward's house where they questioned Connie about her knowledge of the whereabouts of Paul. She innocently told them that she had not seen Paul for quite some time. The cops came back while both Edward and Connie were at home. They delivered the news to both that Paul's body was found lifeless in a dump valley, and they wanted to question Connie about how she knew Paul. At first, Connie lies to the investigators about how she met up with Paul to hide her infidelity act. She later saw photograph pictures that were inside her husband's trench coat. At that moment she realized that Edward knew about her infidelity. One day while the couple had visitors at home, Connie realized the presence of the ornament that Edward used to kill Paul with. She remembered that she had left it at Paul's place and saw it in their house, which linked all the pieces of the jigsaw that Edward was responsible for the manslaughter of Paul. They both confronted each other where Edward expressed his anger due to betrayal while Connie expressed the anger due to being the cause that all that happened due to her unfaithful mistake. They both agreed on forgiveness. I pose a question to you: would you have forgiven your partner for infidelity?
What?
Answer in the comment section below. In the later scenes, we see Connie burning all the pictures that were taken of her together with Paul, as she remembers the good old times. Our main lesson from this is that, no matter how dull your relationship is, it is never advisable to practice infidelity behind your partner's back, since the truth will reveal itself one day, and if the worst goes to the worst, it might end up fatally.